Welcome to the Flynn Brothers podcast. I'm John.
And I'm Jimmy. Today's big idea. Welcome to Basketball Hell Part 2.
We continue our soul-crushing journey through the Sacramento Kings' 16-year playoff drought.
Later, we describe the joyous relief that came with our recent playoff appearance and predict how the team will perform this upcoming season.
Finally, we explain the art of terrible basketball and try to pinpoint the Kings' rock-bottom moment.
It's all coming up. But first, here's the Solons.
Uh-huh. Oh yeah. 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 Uh-huh. Oh yeah.
Well, we left off on a good old-fashioned cliffhanger last episode. Those viewers who listened to Part 1 will remember. And if you haven't listened to Part 1, please stop this podcast right now and go back and listen to Part 1. Agree?
No, stay.
Stay. Once you got them, you don't want them to leave. Fair enough.
Don't
Well,
let them out the door,
well,
even
well.
if you're pointing them at another one.
Well, we'll catch you up then. We left off at the tail end of the 2014-2015 season. The Kings had not made the playoffs since 2006. And George Karl, old George Karl, washed-up coach, has arrived in Sacramento, and at his first meeting with then-star player Rudy Gay tells George Karl, welcome to Basketball Hell, welcoming him to, at the time, and for most of the past, 40 years, the most dysfunctional organization, not only in basketball, but in professional sports. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. And I would say that at this point, we're really entering what I would say are the prime cut years of dysfunction.
Yes. When you were, 5-10 years from the playoffs, it's one thing. But as we're kind of entering these next few years, we're looking at double digits and really no hope in sight. And although Rudy Gay told him, welcome to Basketball Hell, fans, players, people in the organization really had no idea how much deeper we could sink.
Yes, and I'd say the sort of first half or so of the playoff drought is largely characterized by Maloof mismanagement.
Right.
They're cheap. They're trying to move the team for a quick buck. They don't know how hard it is. They're just buffoons who are at the head of this organization. And so it's understandable that it would not work well. But then there is this optimism that surfaces when Vivek Ranadive purchases the team, keeps the team in Sacramento. He's coming from the Warriors, who are become the hottest team in the league. He's looking to spend, if not gargantuan sums of money, at least more money than the Blues were spending. And yet the Kings could not get out of their own way.
Yeah, so Karl comes in at the end of 2014-2015 and kind of caretakes the rest of the year. The Kings continue to do poorly. In the offseason, Vivek Ranadive replaces general manager Pete D'Alessandro, who really made no decisions of his own, it seemed like, and instills former Glory Years player Vlade Divac as the new general manager of the Sacramento Kings. Do you remember how you felt when Vlade was named GM of the Kings?
Nervous. Really nervous.
But also, I think, yes, but he was unproven. He hadn't really been a GM. But there was also a degree of hope because, Kings fans are such suckers for anyone from the Glory Years. If anyone from the Glory Years comes back, we kind of get suckered in. Doug Christie, our starting shooting guard during those great teams, is our head coach now. He's not really proven as coach, but there is a nervousness, you're right, but there is always a kernel of hope with these guys just because we remember all these great memories we had with them.
Yeah, I'll buy that. The Vlade in particular felt sort of correct for this decision because he's this basketball statesman, major figure in European basketball, as well as he was sort of the chemistry maestro of the Glory Years teams. He was the one who seemed to know how all of the pieces fit together, and so I think the thinking behind it was, well, perhaps he can be the one who pulls us out of this mess.
Vlade, you had caught him once or twice in Sacramento walking around. I think you caught him once at a coffee shop. Is that right?
Yeah. He's, his sort of reputation at the time that he quickly developed was not exactly a guy who was deep in the basement grinding tape on second-round draft prospects.
Even as a player, Vlade was known to have smoked cigarettes during halftime. He was never in the best of shape. He was always very naturally gifted and a good basketball player, but there was this sense that he never reached his potential, and you kind of say that maybe a lot of fans sense that in terms of his tenure as a general manager as well.
He was definitely a delegator, and he liked he certainly had not quit smoking, and he was really known. Sacramento had a great coffee scene, particularly around this time, that was burgeoning, and Vlade availed himself of many of the fine cafes.
The heaters.
Yeah, the locally roasted beans.
But to Vlade's credit, it's, Vivek Ranadive is a difficult sports owner to work for because Vivek likes to meddle. He's not the sharpest basketball mind, but he likes to have a lot of input, and it's caused a lot of issues as we see today, and we will see as we go through these next few years. The following season is 2015-2016. The Kings go 33-49. That was the year we drafted Willie Cauley-Stein, a center, 6th overall. Tough with Willie Cauley-Stein. You looked at him physically, and he looked incredibly athletic. He looked incredibly mobile. He looked like he'd be great at defense, but he just never quite, quote-unquote, got it. What do you think was his problem as a basketball player?
Just wanting it. Didn't seem to want it enough, didn't lock in for a consistent enough basis, and just sort of lacked a savviness as a player in terms of deploying all of his physical gifts at the highest level. He made sense as a pairing with Cousins because Cousins was much more of an offensive force, sort of burly, not very mobile as a defender, and Cauley-Stein profiled as somebody who, he can kind of cover up Cousins' mistakes. If there's a blow-by on the perimeter, he can come on the backside and clean it up, but that never sort of materialized, and then no real offensive game outside of throwing down alley-oops.
And this was an era too where Cousins today obviously would be a center, but there was still this era where we were kind of trying to play two big men, and we kind of hadn't embraced the three, so there was kind of an awkwardness as well, all the front court pairings with DeMarcus Cousins. This was the season we brought in famed Celtic Rajon Rondo, who had bounced around the league a little bit. He had won a title, I believe, as a rookie or second-year player in 2008 with the Celtics, right?
Yeah.
And he was known as a brilliant basketball mind, mathematical in his precision, not the easiest teammate to get along with, right? He rubbed some people the wrong way during his tenure in Boston. He had kind of bounced around the league, and he was basically on an expiring contract, and or his contract had expired and signed a 1-year deal with the Kings, something like that.
The thing that had happened was he got traded to the Mavericks and butted heads so much with Rick Carlisle, who's famously sort of a micromanager as a coach, really likes things run his way, whereas Rajon likes getting out there and sort of getting a feel for it and not really wanting too much coach input. So oil and water, and he just got sent away from the team.
Yes.
And then that's when he ended up with the Kings. So Rajon's reputation at this time was absolute rock bottom. Coach killer, team killer, not worth the hassle, a somehow selfish player who racked up a lot of assists.
But he was still talented, and when talented misfit toys need a team, they come to the Sacramento Kings. So he played with us. He led the league in assists that season, eventually got a very big contract the next year when he jumped ship. But, like I said, he's kind of a savant in terms of basketball, Rajon Rondo. He played great with DeMarcus Cousins. They had a wonderful pick-and-roll game. Rajon was a great team player in terms of his ability to pass and distribute the ball. Not the best locker room presence, seemingly. Not the best in terms of team leadership. But it was sort of a rehab year for him. And, he was assist hunting, yes, but for the most part, it gave him sort of a back nine of his career. He eventually wins a title with the Lakers in the bubble, but like you said, he was really at rock bottom, and this year with the Kings really kind of saved his career.
Totally. I thought he was really fun to watch. We had just been devoid of point guard talent really, of any sort. I mean, Isaiah Thomas was a point guard, but played much more like a scoring guard or a
Right.
shooting guard. Whereas Rajon was your classic table setter point guard. And it was just a joy to watch him, even as the Kings were losing. There was just this like, oh, wow, this is what an actual offense
Yes.
feels like. Like, unto himself, Rajon Rondo is a cohesive offensive system.
And, we only won 33 games that year. We were 16 games below 500. But for Kings caught in the doldrums and not having made the playoffs in 10 years, it was like, hey, at least we're somewhat fun to watch. At the end of the year, though, George Karl was fired, and he was replaced by Dave Yeager, a coach who had a little bit more success with the Sacramento Kings.
Yeah.
The next season, 2016 to 2017, the Kings go 32-50, so we win one less game. And we have a new arena. We have replaced the Sleep Train Arena with the Golden One Center. So in downtown Sacramento, it kind of been the doldrums. We're probably going to use that term more than once on this episode. There was this downtown plaza, this mall that was from a bygone era that no one ever really went to. It was basically a ghost town, and they knocked it down, and they built this beautiful Golden One Center, this beautiful arena that still stands today. And it's really wonderful. Big jumbotron, wonderful food options. It's got this big, great bar area where you can watch the game. And it really is one of the best basketball arenas, I would say, in the entire country. Maybe a little dated now, but it really at the time was ahead of the pack, wasn't it?
I'd say it's still quite exceptional now. Certainly, no Intuit Dome or anything like that, but very state of the art while also remaining quite true to Sacramento. Most of the vendors have some connection to a local restaurant in Sacramento. Sierra Nevada, which is a classic NorCal brewery, sort of is their main beer sponsor. So a lot of stuff that makes it feel local while still being, on sort of that national level of quality.
I think looking back at the research for this, 2016 was our worst draft ever. In the first round, we drafted Georgios Papagiannis from Greece. We drafted Malachi Richardson, and we drafted Skal Labissiere. All pretty big players that we thought would pan out, and none of them did. And none of them really made any sort of impact in the NBA.
No, I believe the name, if I were to Greek it up, would be Yorgos Papagiannis.
Yeah.
And he was drafted so much sooner than anybody thought.
Yes,
And
yes.
just it seemed like it was a favor from Vlade to his father.
Right.
Sort of a just brutal decision. You really
Yeah.
just can't waste draft picks. I don't think Vlade early on really understood the importance of draft picks because draft picks were not seen as super important during his heyday.
No.
Malachi Richardson, sort of just your classic G League wing who just kind of never puts together a full skill set. And Skal Labissiere is a G League legend. I mean, he's been bouncing around there still trying to get a contract and just never.
Nearly 7 foot. He really built a lot of muscle. He had an outside shot, but he was just weak as hell. Not aggressive, didn't have the dog. It's a shame because the NBA is the best league on earth, and you could be the greatest guy in any other league on earth and still be bottom of the bench in the NBA. And it's just shows you what level of competition it is.
Yeah, and I think too, it just tells you like the lack of help that DeMarcus Cousins had.
Yes,
I mean, you
yes.
just never really had anybody that he could depend upon. I mean, the closest is probably Rajon Rondo, Rudy Gay, and Isaiah Thomas, all of whom are very flawed players.
And past their prime
Yeah.
and offensive minded
Yeah.
and not good really on defense other than Rondo at some points of his career. Yeah, he was just always surrounded by subpar talent.
Yeah.
Finally, the misery comes to an end. In February of 2017, Vlade Divac trades DeMarcus Cousins to the New Orleans Pelicans. Of course, we get back Tyreek Evans, and the Kings are worse than before. This really signaled the end of the mercurial DeMarcus Cousins era, and sadly, the following season, he tore his Achilles, and he was never the same player. And it brings up an interesting question about DeMarcus Cousins' legacy, because when he was traded to New Orleans, he and Anthony Davis were together and really could have put together a stellar basketball team. And the next season, they were great, and he tore his Achilles, and they never got a great deep playoff run. And, we touched on this a bit in part one, but when you talk about DeMarcus Cousins' legacy, it's, yes, he's one of the most gifted offensive centers of all time, but he's also one of the worst teammates of all time, worst locker room presences of all time. And somewhere in the middle of, his talent and his culpability are these factors that are just outside of his control, which is he's part of, again, the most dysfunctional organization in sports. When you sort of look back at DeMarcus Cousins as a person, as a player, as a King, what sort of comes to mind?
Greatness on an individual level. With the ball in his hands, anything was possible for DeMarcus Cousins. However, so many things could take him away from that. Frustration at his coach, frustration at his opponents, his teammates, the referees. He was just always taking himself away from the gifts that he had. And I think another thing that I really remember about him a lot was he was, and a lot of players say this, but I think DeMarcus really meant it, was he was always talking about loyalty.
Right.
Loyalty was
Right.
huge to DeMarcus. And he wanted to be loyal to Sacramento. He wanted to be the one that broke the playoff drought. He formed real, genuine friendships with people in Sacramento. Everybody from like the owner of McCooney to Carmichael Dave.
Right.
Like DeMarcus really was a fixture and a cornerstone in the community. And that, in this sort of modern era that we think of where star players asked to be traded all the time, DeMarcus never asked to be traded.
Never. There were whiffs of it at times. There were rumors of it at times. And, you know, statistically, he was a two-time All-Star. He was kind of a 22-10, 25-12, like maybe his best season. So I don't know that he necessarily gets his jersey retired in Sacramento, but if ever the day comes where he walks into the building, he deserves a big, fat standing ovation because he was a player that really cared about Sacramento in a town where not every player who comes through the organization cares about the city. And he was there through the worst of it. It's like if someone dated you when you were like addicted to drugs and out of your mind and at your lowest point as a person, but then you go off and you get clean and sober and you marry someone else, you still got to look back at that person who was with you through those terrible times and say, hey, you know, maybe there was volatility, maybe there was this or that. They really stuck by me though when I was a mess.
Yeah.
And so there is this like forever bond, I think, if you're a fan of the Kings during that era, that you just have with him, where it's like, hey, this was our guy. He had our jersey on, flawed, you know, for all his flaws, he really rode or died with us. So, yeah, I always, for him, have a soft spot in my heart for as many frustrations as he caused myself and you know, so many of the fans. How can you not still just tip your cap and kind of look up to the guy for all he did for the city?
Fought hard, fought like hell.
You know, how are you going to stop God's plan? You know, how are you going to stop God's plan? Vladdy, I remember the time, was heavily criticized for trading Cousins. Anytime this happens in sports, when you trade your best player, however mercurial they are, you will get criticized. And I remember Vladdy, vintage Vladdy Divac as a general manager, before the press said, if we are not better in 2 years, I will step down as general manager of the Sacramento Kings. And then he coughed because he was letting out a puff of smoke. I made up that last part.
Which was a sweet thing to say, but also did just put a self-imposed clock on his tenure.
But you know, we
which was
respected
fair.
it. We needed gut checks.
Yeah.
We needed people to set deadlines, right? Because we didn't want to toil forever.
Right. And the main piece in that trade was Buddy Hield, who was a rookie in the midst of doing a pretty solid rookie year. He had had a good year at Oklahoma before that and had caught Vivek's eye, and the famous thing that Vivek said about Buddy Hield was shoots like Steph, big like Clay. And neither of those things would prove to be true about Buddy Hield, mainly being that Clay and Steph are not only two of the greatest shooters of all time, but their savviness is at a really, really high level, and that would not prove to be the case with Buddy Hield.
Nice guy, but basketball IQ, you really can't get much lower.
He loves making the wrong decision at the wrong time, taking the shot that you really just need to work a good possession, and he'll jack up an ill-advised contested three with 18 seconds left on the shot clock.
I'm sure we'll touch on that a little more moving forward. Next year, 2017 to 2018, the Kings go 27-55. This is Dave Yeager's second year, but there's a bit of a light when we draft De'Aaron Fox for 5th overall. He is one of the best players in franchise history, I think we can comfortably say.
Off the top of my head, he's no lower than
Oscar Robertson, Chris Webber. I'd probably maybe have Sabonis
I'd
above
put
him.
DeMarcus above him too.
Yeah. So he's top 5, let's say.
Peja and him are kind of who I would say are tied for that spot.
But he's, in his first year, he had kind of the Dragon Ball Z hair, and he hit some clutch shots, and he was the fastest guy in the league, and he was very, very exciting to watch. It was kind of like a lightning bolt hitting our team. We were rebuilding. We were incredibly young. It wasn't the best season to watch, but there were a couple bright spots.
It was brutal it's the hardest thing to do when you are a team that is going through a rebuild, as we were with Cousins, and you have to pull the plug on an unsuccessful rebuild and start rebuilding again.
The rebuild on top of the rebuild on top of the rebuild. We were like on our third rebuild of the playoff drought.
And so this needed a positive figure, and Fox really did come in bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, as it were.
Right.
And he was in the same draft with Lonzo, and there were some rumors that the Lakers wanted Fox, and De'Aaron just routinely outplayed Lonzo in that first year as well, which gave us some good hope. But yeah.
The Kings were incredibly young, and then on the other side of the coin, we were incredibly old. It was a cool season because we had an almost 40-year-old, if not a 40-year-old, Vince Carter, who was the centerpiece of one of the greatest games we have ever witnessed in our entire lives. It was in December of 2017, and we saw old Vince Carter, maybe his great last game in the NBA. One of his great last games, certainly his really only memorable one on the Kings. LeBron and the Cavaliers were in town. Again, the team had won the title a year and a half before, and LeBron, best player in the world, and they come in and they're heavily favored. And Vince Carter, I wrote it down, scored 24 points as season high, and we upset the Cavs. And I remember you and I were watching the game going crazy. It was one of our first games in the new Golden One Center. What do you remember from that night?
I remember that LeBron James had an off night and still pretty much had a 20-point triple-double. Unbelievable. Just kind of couldn't get his shot to go, but was making everything else happen, and his speed and power in the open floor is jaw-dropping. Something that's never fails to amaze me is seeing the absolute top athletes in the NBA live is such an different experience than
I know,
on television.
Gotta just quickly say this. There's so much polarization with Russell Westbrook. He's definitely past his prime. He definitely has not been good in several years. He definitely has had some boneheaded decisions the last few years. But when we were kids, we saw the Oklahoma City Thunder, Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook. And Kevin Durant was very impressive live in person.
Yes.
But I will never forget watching Russell Westbrook in the open court. I get it. Like, there's people who fan over him too much now that he's washed up, and there's people that crap on him too much now that he's washed up. But seeing that man at his prime was something to behold, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Pure power and speed. I also remember Vince was just on fire.
Could not miss.
Unconscious, hitting really tough fadeaway shots, like deep in the corner. No conscience.
Really close game, too. Just very exciting. Really wonderful. Wonderful game. The following season, 2018-2019, the Kings are pretty decent. We go 39-43. It was pretty much our best record since the drought started. We are basically playing 500 ball, and there was some hope. Vlade Divac famously called us a super team, just young, and the members of that super team were De'Aaron Fox, who was sort of blossoming in his second season. We had Bogdan Bogdanovic, who was a solid kind of tweener guard. He's dealt with some injuries throughout his career, but pretty good soldier when he was a member of the Sacramento Kings, wasn't he?
Yes, the second banana on Serbia's national team to Nikola Jokic.
And then we had Buddy Hield. And, we had a couple decent players. I believe we got Marvin Bagley, number 2 overall, although we drafted him over who, John?
Luka Doncic.
Why is this especially painful given that Vlade Divac was our GM?
Vlade Divac knows Luka Doncic's dad. Like, no one is more connected in European basketball than Vlade Divac. And I think it's just a classic case of overthinking it. I think Vlade knew Luka too well, and Luka's dad too well. Luka's dad, I believe his name is Sasha. And Sasha was also a professional basketball player, even more so than Vlade. Liked having himself a good time and didn't really value the body perhaps as much as it should have been valued. And certainly we've seen that bear some fruit in Luka. It's just that the talent completely overweighs any of those considerations. And for a team that was desperate for a superstar, and really the only way that the Sacramento Kings can get a superstar is through the draft.
Yeah.
Passing on one is devastating.
It is the worst draft mistake in the history of our franchise.
And arguably almost any franchise.
Yeah.
I mean, it's at least in the top 5. Yeah.
Really quick, though, there was a bright spot in the year. Bogdanovich hit one of the great playoff drought buzzer beaters of this era against the Los Angeles Lakers. You were at the game. What do you kind of remember about that game?
I remember that LeBron James was a scratch right before the game, so it was a bit of a letdown. I was definitely looking forward to
He had
seeing,
just come to the Lakers,
Yes.
LeBron James.
Definitely looking forward to seeing Laker LeBron. He's a scratch. And as a result, the Lakers were not that good because they hadn't really remade the team. They traded a bunch of guys to get LeBron. And it was still that first year where they hadn't got
they had all the
got
young guys. They hadn't
Davis,
traded them all for AD.
Yeah. That's right. And so what I remember is Bogdanovich catches the ball at the top of the key. He gets a screen, and Brook Lopez, I believe, was still on the Lakers at this time. He comes out. Bogdanovich lofts a three-pointer. It had been a close game the entire time, and Bogdanovich's three-pointer swishes through. Absolute pandemonium. People are going nuts. And I had a friend, actually, who was sitting down pretty much on the court level, and he said that he was right behind Bogdanovich's dad, and Bogdanovich's dad had tears streaming down his face.
Just so happy.
So happy for his son
So
who,
happy for
who
his
destroyed
boy.
And then actually later that night, I was out on the town in Sacramento, and I saw Bogdanovich sort of tucked into a corner.
Yeah, we were the town of Sacramento throwing at him all our finest
Yes.
food and beverage and
cetera.
women. Yeah, of course, as you do for a conquering warrior. Yeah,
Yes.
so quite a wonderful moment that year. But yeah, again, the Kings were pretty fun this year. Super team, just young. We're a few games under 500. It was pretty fun. We're hoping it would get better, but in 2019, 2020, it really didn't. In the offseason before, Dave Yeager kind of inexplicably got fired. He was really turning the team around, and I thought was a pretty solid coach. But Vlade Divac really wanted to hire Luke Walton, who had just been fired from the Lakers. Vlade, I think, had played with Walton for a year on the Lakers, sort of in that early mid-2000s era, and just really liked him as a coach. And again, it was very inexplicable because Dave Yeager had improved our record, but we're like, hey, got to kind of trust Vlade. Like, the team is sort of blossoming. I guess we'll trust that Luke Walton's the guy. Luke Walton, too, had kind of proven himself. He served in place of Steve Kerr, I think on the 2017 Warriors when they won like 33 games in a row or whatever
Kerr
it was,
had
right?
debilitating back issues that kept him from coaching, and Walton stepped in and did phenomenally.
But the team sadly goes backwards. Walton just kind of can't figure out our offense. We go 31-41. It was only 72 games that season because it was shortened by COVID. And just kind of a anticlimactic year. There was some stuff that kind of came out after COVID that was sort of tarnishing the franchise as well. It was revealed during COVID that the previous year, former Chief Revenue Officer John David had embezzled $13.4 million in sponsorship payments from the Kings and their corporate partners over the previous 4 years, and he was sentenced to 7 years in a penitentiary. And again, it's just like, hey, not really press the Sacramento Kings need. You know what I mean?
No. And was it John David or was it Jeff?
Jeff David.
Jeff
that's
David.
Right. Jeff David.
Don't
Sorry,
want
I
to
read that
commit
wrong.
libel against any John Davids.
That's right. Especially a guy like you named John. You want to protect the John name.
That's right.
Another very embarrassing, awful incident was during the COVID break. There was a long-time play-by-play announcer for the Sacramento Kings, Grant Napier, who was often seen as sort of a controversial figure in Sacramento. People like us really enjoyed his almost wrestling style of announcing games. He was an unabashed homer. He was a New Yorker. He was a total hothead. He would get into the refs. He would get into the opposing players, and he was just a fun homer announcer. But I knew a lot of Sacramento Kings fans, and especially opposing teams fans, that absolutely hated him, who just found him insufferable, who found him grating. But, you know, he was ours, so we liked him, and he had a great partnership with former coach and longtime basketball genius Jerry Reynolds. They partnered together very well.
Yeah.
But Grant was already sort of seen as this kind of polarizing, controversial figure, and this kind of came to a head during the height of the George Floyd protests. And, you know, George Floyd, you know, obviously everyone knows the story and the heinous act that occurred. And there's all these Black Lives Matter protests going on. And there had kind of always been this sense in the organization from people of color that maybe Grant Napier was like 10% either racist or conservative. And so, of all people, DeMarcus Cousins tweets at Grant Napier and asks him what he thinks of Black Lives Matter. And Grant Napier responds, quote, "Hey, how are you? Thought you forgot about me. Haven't heard from you in years." All caps, all lives matter. Every single one. Which obviously at the time, worst thing you could have possibly said. Still now, worst thing you could have possibly said. To this day, I don't believe Grant Napier has ever apologized for this. It was a completely insensitive thing to say at the literally worst time he could have said it.
Yeah, and you know, you kind of couldn't hide behind the I didn't know that all lives matter was an offensive way to respond to that, because we had been over that, like,
yes,
boy,
as a society,
hundreds of times at that point.
Yes.
And I think that if you didn't know, it was almost worse than saying it. It's just like, boy, you're really incurious about all that's going on. And I think really Grant had all the skills that you would want from a play-by-play broadcaster, but really did not fit into this modern, more socially conscious era of the NBA, where, you know, athletes are far more empowered and have more of a say and can speak out if they want to, although that is sort of curtailed a bit in recent years more. But yeah, it was sort of a holdover from the older way that the NBA used to work. And I think the Kings also saw themselves as a very forward-facing, socially justice, progressive organization that, it's really hard to have a guy like this be your lead play-by-play announcer then.
After Grant Napier's tweet, which again, he never apologized for, and it is still on Twitter. He has still not deleted this tweet, despite all the problems it has caused him professionally and personally. Former Kings players Matt Barnes and Chris Webber came out and basically stated that they had always felt Grant was racist, and this just sort of made it impossible for the team to keep him on any longer, and he was let go and replaced by ESPN's Mark Jones, a terrific play-by-play guy who calls about half our games now. I wish Mark Jones called more of our games, but he's busy with his national schedule.
That's right.
So we get Kyle Draper in his stead, who's fine.
I was ashamed for Grant, because I'd say even when we like pretend to call basketball games, it's basically his voice in our head.
We grew up with him. It's just the voice. It's like if you grew up a Dodger fan and you love Vin Scully, it's the same thing, right? It's the same thing.
Absolutely. But then when Weber came in, it's like, man, if Chris Weber's saying it, then you gotta go.
Yes, there's some credibility here. All right, quick break, then we'll be right back. All right, the next season, 2020 to 2021. Again, the Kings go 31-41. It was a, once again, shortened 72-game season. 2 years, same record. Still super depressing. Before the season, Vlade Divac had stepped down. He said he would step down after 2 years if we were not better. We got better for one season. He fired that coach. He stayed 2 more years, stepped down after 3 years. And he was replaced by Monty McNair, who I think we can comfortably say is the best general manager this organization has had since Jeff Petrie.
Yes. However, I would call this pulling a Vivek, because Vivek and Vlade came to sort of a loggerheads. Like, they were like, well, I don't want to pay you, but Vlade didn't. Like, Vlade just left, but Vivek kind of forced him out. But what Vivek did consistently is he would have the coach in place before bringing in the GM. Yeah. And typically what happens is the GM is hired and then hires the coach of their choosing to sort of execute the vision that they have for the team. Instead, Vivek recurringly would have a coach in place, then hire the GM. The GM would be unhappy with the coach who was in place, fire that coach, hire a new coach, and then that GM gets fired. The coach stays, new GM. This GM's upset with the old coach, but they have to keep him. And then eventually that coach gets fired, and then a new coach comes in. So there was this stop and start nature and these shooting yourself in the foot mistakes on an organizational level that dogged the Kings.
Monty McNair's first decision was a great one. He drafted Tyrese Halliburton, who fans of the NBA will know just led the Pacers to the NBA Finals. Sadly, had a season-ending injury during that finals run. It's a shame he's not a King. We absolutely loved watching him. We knew he was destined for great things. He wanted to play with Sacramento. But really what it came down to was his playing style clashed with De'Aaron Fox. De'Aaron Fox loves to play fast, loves to have the ball in his hands, loves to be a scoring point guard. Tyrese loves to have the ball in his hands, likes to play fast, yes, but also slow it down, and loves to distribute. And these guys just kind of couldn't play off the ball with each other. And there were some moments where they could, but it clearly was a clash, and it clearly was, as the season played out, the fans, the organization looking at them both and saying, well, kind of one has to go.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there's a bunch of revisionist history where people are like, the Kings should have traded Fox, and really Fox just didn't have very much value at that time. He was coming off 2 kind of lackluster years.
Yeah, he was trying to do this thing where the NBA had gotten hip to how fast he was, so he was trying to develop more of a mid-range jump shot, which he has pretty down pat now. Yeah. But there were a couple years where he was really struggling and really was, not a highly valued player as he was when he first came in the league.
Yeah, and there's a look to your game that happens when you settle for mid-range jump shots over taking it hard to the basket. Yeah. Even if it's going to prolong your career, it looks like you're not trying as hard. And I would say that was kind of the wrap on Fox, whereas Tyrese is what basically every team wants, and so it was a really good trade chip.
There were fun games, but oftentimes watching the team during this season, they were very disjointed. I mentioned him earlier in part 1. Hassan Whiteside, who was drafted with DeMarcus Cousins, comes back to the Sacramento Kings with his unfinished business, which, as we mentioned before, was being terrible on the Sacramento Kings.
Yes, it remained unfinished.
yeah. To this day, that not all the vegetables were eaten off the dinner plate. The next season, 2021 to 2022, the Kings go 30-52. There was this terrible trend. You mentioned the GM coach cycle. We also were in this weird middle ground of the bad teams where we weren't quite bottoming out enough to be like a top 3 pick, and we weren't good enough to be in the playoffs, but we were just kind of getting these like middling lottery picks, like the 8th pick, the 7th pick, the 9th pick, the 13th pick, the 5th pick. And we just, one time we got the number 2 pick, we draft Marvin Bagley over Luka Doncic. So there's just this series of unluckiness, of not committing to bottoming out, of not committing to rebuilds, of not committing to coaches that just continues to doom the Kings. Yeah. This season, I feel really was about as dark as it got. Luke Walton was still the coach, a holdover from the Divac years, and Walton was fired after going 6-11 to start the season. We have to talk about Luke Walton's last game as coach of the Sacramento Kings. It is affectionately known as the puke game. Yes. This is one of the first Sacramento Kings games. I was a few months into dating my now fiance Lauren, and she came over and watched a Kings game with us. And we used to have on YouTube TV, they wouldn't always play commercials. They would sometimes during the commercial breaks give you the arena feed. So you would see like, the halftime performer or, the people with the t-shirt cannon and stuff. And we were watching, and it was during one of these ad breaks, and the camera just sort of zooms in on this very overweight man sitting courtside, and he's very red in the face, and he just doesn't look well. And then all of a sudden, he projectile vomits all over himself, just makes a complete mess all over himself, all over the court. The players are absolutely revolted. They're snickering in their sleeves. The arena staff have to come over and clean it up and mop it up and get the guy out of there, whether he drank too much, whether he ate too much, whether it was both, whether he was sick, whether it was all three. Who knows? We don't know, right?
He'd watched too much Kings
That was
basketball.
it. He watched too much Kings basketball and had an awful reaction to it. But yeah, it just sort of summed up where we were as an organization. And next day, Luke is fired after the Kings lose that game, of course. People were calling him Puke Walton.
Yeah.
And he was replaced by Alvin Gentry, who, again, another caretaker coach, super past his prime. And there was a hilarious thing you would observe Alvin Gentry doing as he kind of caretook the rest of the season, as shepherded the Kings through loss after loss, after win, after 3 losses in a row. When the Kings would do really poorly, what was the hilarious thing you would always observe Alvin Gentry doing?
Emphatically calling timeout by stomping his foot down and striding out on the middle of the floor saying, timeout, god damn it. With the GOT.
You could always see him mouthing it as the
Yeah.
Kings would lose. He'd
Yes.
turn it over, give it up in transition. You'd see Gentry call the timeout and mouth those exact words. And it was always so hilarious. I mean, we were laughing. A lot of it's important to note, as depressed as we were watching a lot of these games, we were also laughing pretty hard.
Yes.
As it's just like, boy, we are just so hapless.
The ineptitude. The thing about Gentry, to make a extended metaphor, is he was a retired teacher who was brought in to substitute the last half of the year for a very troubled, below average class.
Yes. It's like, let's get us to graduation
Yes.
in one piece.
And he
Yeah.
was just exasperated all the time. He eventually moves into the front office, so it was sort of like he was just like, all right, Alvin, take a real good look at this team and who can we keep, who can we lose. And I think too, Luke Walton kind of got a bum rap as well. I think he's really a guy who has that high level basketball IQ, but is very laid back. And the Kings at this time were too young to sort of take the responsibility of being professionals that you need to have if you're going to have a laid back coach. Because if you have a laid back coach, you have to have the discipline, or you have to have players on the team who are going to set a standard that won't be slipped below, as the coach isn't doing. If the coach isn't
Right.
yelling at somebody every day or really chewing people out and making sure that everybody's at every meeting, and you don't have anybody doing that, then things get lax. And that was really what sort of felt like with Luke Walton, was that just there wasn't any hope of anything turning around because no one gave a damn enough to do anything about it.
Monty McNair, toward the end of the season, made a genius stroke, one that simultaneously saved the organization and doomed the organization. He traded Tyrese Halliburton to the Indiana Pacers for Domantas Sabonis. It was kind of one of those rare trades that works out for both teams in the short term, where the Pacers had 2 centers and Miles Turner and Domantas Sabonis. Kings had 2 point guards in De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Halliburton, and we traded a guard for a center, and it worked out well for both teams. Obviously, a little better for the Pacers, but for the Kings, it worked out very well in the short term. We actually ended up doing much better than the Pacers in a couple of years after, even though the Pacers have since leapfrogged us, although Miles Turner now off of the Pacers, and things have just changed so much as they do in the NBA. But it is what eventually led us to break the playoff drought the following season, and you could even feel it a bit in those first few games when Domas came over and played with Fox. We were calling the duo the Fox and the Ox. Domantas Sabonis, known for his bruising style of basketball, and they really immediately developed a chemistry in those first few games together.
There had never been a dependable center that De'Aaron Fox had played with. And if you're a speedy point guard, having a guy who sets good screens is just, money. It's your bread and butter as a player in the NBA at this level, and that was what Sabonis really brought to the table, as well as a savviness, a toughness that had really been lacking from the team. And he also was a guy who was willing to sort of scream and yell and chest bump with guys and throw his arms around guys and sort of be that vocal, performative leader that Fox always was, sort of a lead by example, very restrained, kind of didn't find his voice until very late into his Kings tenure.
The following season, 2022-2023, The Kings go, I'm not lying, 48-34. That's right. We win more than we lose. A couple great things happen. First and foremost, we hired Mike Brown as head coach. It was Monty McNair's guy. He had coached LeBron into the finals and had developed a reputation as a great defensive coach, which is precisely sort of what these Kings needed. And in addition, we signed Malik Monk, our spark plug off the bench, who we still have today. Great player. We had a stalwart veteran, I forgot to mention a couple seasons before, who had come in, Harrison Barnes, who really stuck with us through some of those lean years toward the end of the 2010s, and recently we traded him away. But always a very, very professional player, very great player, very knockdown shooter. And we got a couple other knockdown shooters. We drafted Keegan Murray, and we signed Kevin Huerter. And we really had a great team that season. The starting lineup was De'Aaron Fox, Kevin Huerter, Keegan Murray, Harrison Barnes, and Domantas Sabonis, and Domas did a lot of facilitating at the top of the key, and we just surrounded him by shooting and fast point guard and De'Aaron Fox, and the team really was just so fun to watch.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just whirring around, set the record for offensive rating, which is now broken every year, but
Right.
It was really incredible. And Mike Brown had spent a lot of years as the lead assistant for Steve Kerr,
Yeah.
and so there was importing of a lot of the things that the Golden State Warriors did, sort of a read and react offense, lots of three-point shooting, lots of off-ball movement. That was just like a breath of fresh air. Unbelievable how rewarding it was to consistently watch and root for a good team.
And fans of the glory years Sacramento Kings, we remember the fast-paced offense, the ball movement, and this was precisely what this team had as well. So it brought back lots of great nostalgic memories. This team is known as the Beam Team. They invented the saying, light the beam. Sort of reminds me of that old Solon song, Beam Me Back to Sacramento. But could check it out on Spotify. But yeah, the Beam Team. So there was this development early in the season as the Kings were winning games where Vivek or someone in the organization wanted there to be some sort of bat signal, some sort of signal that could be seen throughout the city that the Kings had won a game. And it was someone's idea to shoot a purple laser into the sky and kind of illustrate, the Kings won by shooting the beam into the sky. And then Vivek's great stroke of genius was bigger, brighter. Yeah. And that was precisely what happened. And then the Kings installed this big fake button that a player would get to smack at the end of a game and act as though it triggers the beam. And there would be this really cool sense you would get from the crowd at the end of a game when the Kings had it in the bag, and it'd be like the dwindling seconds, and you hear the crowd chant, light the beam, like they're calling for blood. And even at away games, right, when we've come into someone else's house and beat them, you'd hear the Kings fans there, great fans that travel chanting it. And it was just so cool, man. It just was such a great moment in time. Of course, the Kings still do, they still light the beam. They're not as good of a team. It's not, the same members of the Beam Team, but I don't know. Do you think the beam has lasting power? Is it sticking around?
Oh, for sure. It has to. I think it's one of those things that just organically immediately hits.
Yes.
The light the beam chance, I think, is one of the funniest things. I think it's very Sacramento. It's a little bit corny. It's a little bit hokey, but at the same time, you're just like, well, that is fun. Like, that's a great time.
It's almost like something we would have had during the playoff drought years as almost like a tongue-in-cheek thing. And I'm looking forward to probably in the near future having some playoff drought years and continuing to light them 20 times a year when we get those handful
sort
of wins.
Of ironic light the beam
right.
Yeah.
That year, the Kings were number 3 in the Western Conference. They won the Pacific Division, and we broke the playoff drought. We clinched the playoffs with a win over the Blazers, and our new announcer, Mark Jones, rang it in as thus, quote, and with that, the angst, the anger, the disappointment comes to an end. The Sacramento Kings are going to the playoffs. I remember watching that game with you, a chill going up both of our spines. How do you remember feeling when you heard Mark Jones say those words?
Oh, man, a chill just went up my spine. Like a weight that had been weighing on me for most of my life was lifted, that I got to taste a joy, a flavor of ice cream I hadn't had since I was 11 years old, which used to be my favorite.
Melancholy, would you almost say? There was there's this bitter sweetness.
Just all the years, all those years.
It's sort of how I imagine Odysseus felt when he finally made it back to his wife. You know, all the travel, all the angst, the disappointment, the anger.
Something you had wanted for so long, and it was somewhat of a foregone conclusion because the Kings were pretty good that year, and the West, for a variety of reasons, wasn't as strong. And so you sort of knew maybe 2/3 of the way through the year, it's like, oh, we're going to make the playoffs.
Right,
we're actually going to get in.
We were at the top of the conference for most of the season, and the West dealt with a lot of injuries and stuff that year, and the Kings just did very well. In the first round of the playoffs, we faced the Golden State Warriors, who had just come off winning their 4th title in the Steph Curry era. Still a very formidable team, dwindling a bit, sort of entering their twilight years as a dynasty. Hard-fought series, really great series. Not rigged at all, like, the 2002 Western Conference Finals, but a lot of controversy with, Draymond Green stomping on DeMontis's chest and imploring the crowd. And it all comes to a head in Game 7, where the Kings are once again at home, once again have the chance to advance and knock off one of the all-time great teams. And what does Steph Curry do?
Has arguably the greatest game of his entire career and drops 50 points on an array of unreal shots.
And devastatingly, the Kings lose to the Warriors in 7 games. I remember at the time, we had friends who were Golden State Warriors fans who would invite us over. Hey, come watch the game. We'll watch the game. And we would always have to kind of politely tell them no, just because it's like, I get it. As a Warriors fan, you've won 4 titles. A first-round playoff series is kind of fun to watch. You can knock back a few beers. You and we were pacing the floor. I felt like my heart was going to burst out of my chest. It had been 16 years since I watched the team I love play playoff meaningful basketball. And it was almost a relief when they lost, because it's like, thank God I don't have to put myself through this anymore. It's like I almost got used to the losing, the comfort of the losing, right?
Yeah, of not getting my hopes up, not feeling the tension of it. It's like, I'll be let down, but at least my mind was off whatever was going on in my life. The other thing too that had happened during that series was the Warriors sort of figured out the Kings offense and then gave sort of a playbook to the rest of the league as to how to defend it by dropping Kevon Looney deep into the post off of Sabonis, who still lacks kind of a really consistent mid-range jumper, and then that gummed up a lot of that beautiful motion offense that we had.
Outplayed, outcoached, really outclassed, looking back on it.
And in addition, De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis were dealing with injuries at the end there, and so the team just sort of ran out of gas, ran out of belief against sort of this Warriors team that was so good. And there were a couple of chances for the Kings to steal a victory. Harrison Barnes had a missed game-winning opportunity that, again, it's one of those things that I said at the first part. When you're kind of an underdog in a matchup like this, if you have a game that you can win, that you should win, you have to win it, or it feels almost impossible to knock off a superior opponent.
Forever hold your peace, huh? The following season, 2023 to 2024, the Kings only win 2 fewer games. They go 46-36. It's another solid year, but really, there's just less three-pointers falling. The Kings had a much better offense the year before. To your point, the Warriors gave the rest of the league a blueprint of how to stop us. Sag off Sabonis, dare us to shoot threes, punish us because we're not a great defensive team. We sort of lose that defensive spirit we had the first year Mike Brown was in there. You could kind of tell he had a more assertive style of coaching that was starting to wear on the team a little bit. He now is the new coach of the New York Knicks, which no one's more of a taskmaster than the outgoing coach, Tom Thibodeau. So I think Mike Brown will be a bit of a breath of fresh air in there. But he's still a very demanding coach, and I think some players bucked against it. And, the other tough thing was we only had 2 fewer wins, but we were a 9th seed versus a 3 seed. It just goes to show you how difficult the Western Conference is when more of the teams are healthy.
Yes, the Kings also enjoyed historic injury luck the year before, the Beam Team year. Everybody was mostly healthy most of the year. And then this season, there was just guys who we got really great years out of. Keegan Murray had one of the all-time great shooting seasons as a rookie. Mike Brown asked him to do some more stuff to diversify his game, which is going to be necessary for his long-term development, but seemed to hamper him a bit in the short term. But the biggest blow was Kevin Huerter, who was pretty much on a heater all that year with the Beam Team. Just sort of lost his shooting touch and lost his confidence.
Has ever since.
And just never really was the guy that we needed him to be, and it really gummed up the offense. And then we were searching for answers at that 2-guard spot. And when you're searching for answers as a team, you're just not going to develop the consistency that you need to win.
On the plus side, we avenged our playoff loss to the Golden State Warriors, and we beat the Warriors in the play-in tournament. It was Klay Thompson's last game as a Warrior. He shot 0 for 10, I believe, either from the floor or from 3, and it was kind of a sad way for Klay Thompson and the Warriors era to end. But then the next game we played the Pelicans, and we got absolutely slaughtered. And it was a situation where I believe we had played the Pelicans 3 or 4 previous times in the season and had gotten slaughtered every time. So it's like, boy, our guards should really be up, and we really should put forth a good effort. And again, it was just an absolute molly-whopping.
Yeah, just didn't have any answer for Zion Williamson. Not that anyone does, but he plays the 4 against us, and he's a supersized 4, and we don't have a supersized 4. We have 2 undersized 4s, and they just made us look like children.
But you got the sense with the lack of size, with the lack of consistent shooting, with the lack of defensive prowess. This was a solid, good Sacramento Kings team, certainly a playoff team or play-in team every year, but had a very low ceiling. You could not see them really going to the conference finals or achieving some of the same heights as the Glory Year Kings. And so last season, 24-25, the Kings go 40-42, back under 500 where we're most comfortable. We signed DeMar DeRozan, one of the bigger free agent signings to ever come to Sacramento. DeMar DeRozan's been a star player his whole career, really artistically beautiful to watch, mid-range game, never an incredible defensive player, always kind of a tweener between guard and forward, and, was on some great playoff Toronto Raptors teams, was great on the Spurs, and has been a very solid professional here in his 1 year in Sacramento, going into his 2nd year. But, not a really a great fit with De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis. Kind of gummed up the floor.
Yeah, we got him for pretty cheap. I mean, it was a Harrison Barnes swap, essentially. And he just plays a style of basketball that mathematically doesn't really work with the modern play, the modern style. It doesn't really like taking threes. It takes a lot of really difficult mid-range jump shots, which were cool to watch at the beginning of the year. He is really automatic on those if you have a either first or second year player on him or a weak defender. DeRozan can pretty much sink him at will, but because he can sink tough shots, he also sometimes settles for very tough shots, and that can be quite frustrating to watch.
The beginning of the year, the team just felt off. Immediately, things felt weird. It felt like Fox was kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. It felt like the team did not have that same Beam Team chemistry. We're having these ugly losses to inferior teams, and we just feel so far off from the good teams and the above 500 teams.
Yeah.
And more than that, the team really feels like they've fully turned on Mike Brown, and Mike Brown is eventually fired after starting the season 13-18. The loss came before he got fired. I believe we were playing the Pistons, and we were up, double figures or so with a few minutes left. And then toward the end of the game, De'Aaron Fox fouled someone, and they hit a 3-pointer, so they gave him a 4-point play that eventually let him win the game, and we just basically gave it away. And, not as bad as the puke game, but still a pretty bad way to go out. So Mike Brown is fired, I think, 18 months after winning Coach of the Year his first season in Sacramento. And he's replaced with another man from the glory years, Doug Christie, who was a broadcaster for a couple of years and then served as an assistant coach under, I believe, Mike Brown as well as Luke Walton, maybe a little bit, or just Mike Brown?
I think he was the holdover from
Walton.
Walton's
That's
staff,
what I remember as well. And, you and I love Christie. He cracks open smelling salts and gets jazzed up before every game. He does some really cool stuff. The players seem to really love him, but he's unproven. And he was a defensive specialist when he played. We don't really have the personnel to play great defense. I think, Christie's trying to change that. But yeah, I don't know. What do you remember seeing last season from Christie as a coach, and what are you kind of expecting to see this season?
Very much like a raw sort of guy, like a guy who's still in fantastic shape, can jump right into a drill alongside NBA players and demonstrate it. I think has a good perspective as a player, a guy who's played on some great teams against a lot of great players, but wasn't himself a top of the league great player. And so he understands the work that goes into greatness and sort of the elements of a team that you need to have to fit into place. I don't know about him so much as like a tactician, but as sort of a spiritual leader of the team, I feel pretty good about him.
And you just trust the players and hope they can figure out the playmaking.
That, and I think there's so many like coaches on a modern NBA bench that you can outsource some of that stuff to. Like you can be the offensive guru,
and you
can be the defensive guru.
And
he knows that's, I think, one of the hallmarks of Christie's leadership style is empowering other people. And I think that will serve him well. Whether or not it ends up actually leading to victories is another question.
This past trade deadline, De'Aaron Fox and Rich Paul forced his way out, and he was traded to the San Antonio Spurs, and in return, we got Zach LaVine. Again, there's been some revisionist history about De'Aaron Fox did not force his way out, but he did not commit to Sacramento long-term. It didn't seem like he was satisfied with the direction of his franchise. I don't blame De'Aaron Fox for not wanting to be on the Sacramento Kings and for wanting to pair with Victor Wembanyama. I don't blame him for that at all. I'm a little annoyed he thinks so little of us as fans, or at least it feels that way, that he acts as though he never wanted to be traded and, the management just decided to do that. And it's just like, you wanted to be on a better team. Like, no one's mad at you. Just be honest about it, right? I don't blame him. I don't, Tyrese, I think the thing that stings most is Tyrese quoted in the press said he was going to be with the Kings his whole career. And then so to have the point guard we did stick with do the opposite of that is very heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking we lost Tyrese. It's heartbreaking we lost De'Aaron. But it is what it is. It's like, as Sacramento Kings fans, there's one thing we've learned. Hey, you don't want to be on our team? We'll pack your bag. If you are going to play on the Sacramento Kings, you have to be okay living in Sacramento and wearing that purple jersey, don't you?
Yeah. I think what De'Aaron did was a smart business decision in a way that he knew he couldn't be the best player on the team, and that was essentially what the Kings were asking him to be if he wanted to have any success. And so he looked at his options and he decided to pair with the French phenom Victor Wembanyama. But I think it's this very sort of coldly calculated play that is somewhat typical of modern NBA players who sort of think of themselves as brands, as corporations, and there's very little of that loyalty that, say, a DeMarcus Cousins had that he stuck to even at the expense of his financial and career success. And so even though De'Aaron Fox achieved more success in a Kings uniform and was the sort of driving force behind us breaking the playoff drought, DeMarcus Cousins exists in a far fonder place in my memory than De'Aaron. Not that De'Aaron even cares about that, or that
doesn't at all.
It isn't that big of a deal to him. And I think that sort of attitude, though, is the type of thing that leaves you at the end of your career, which, there's been some talk about his fit on the Spurs. Is he going to fit with Wembanyama? They've drafted a bunch of guards as well. And it's like, well, if he gets traded to another team and then he gets traded to another team, it's like, well, where's your home? Where do you actually belong?
And what's your career? Is he a one-time All-Star, one-time All-NBA? He's had one really good season, but for the most part, in my opinion, he has not quite lived up to the potential he's had. So anyway, He's off the Kings now. We stick with the guys who wear our purple and black. And the guy we got is Zach LaVine in return, who, not our favorite player in the entire world. Doesn't mesh super well with DeMar DeRozan or Domantas Sabonis, but those are our big three heading into this next season.
Which was ironic because the Chicago Bulls had a pretty similar situation with Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, and a offensive-minded European big man, and that did not work very well.
They were terrible.
And the Kings were like, terrible. we'll have what they're having.
Yeah, and last play-in game, we laid an egg against Dallas, got absolutely slaughtered. I believe Dallas then went on to play the Pelicans and got absolutely slaughtered. So we got slaughtered by the team that went on to get slaughtered.
And then the Pelicans went on to the playoffs against the Oklahoma City Thunder, who swept the Pelicans.
Yes.
So we got killed by the team that got killed by the team that got swept by the eventual champions.
Yeah, so we were pretty close that season. Anyway, at the end of the year, the general manager, Monty McNair, steps down and is replaced by Scott Perry. And that is the end of the past of the Sacramento Kings. When we come back from the break, we're going to be looking forward to the future. All right, looking forward to next season, 2025-2026. Of course, when this episode airs, we'll have had about a week of NBA basketball, so we'll see how correct these predictions are, even though they'll be a little more forward-thinking than that. I'll fire some questions at you, and we can discuss. What do you think the Sacramento Kings record will be this season?
I think we are going to win 36 games.
I feel 38 and 44. So we're both thinking under 500.
Yeah.
Decent, but under 500.
Yes. I think just mathematically, we don't have enough guys who shoot three-pointers at a good enough clip, and we don't play defense well enough to win very many games. And our offense will be sometimes explosive and high-powered, but I can see us also going through some pretty brutal lulls.
That was going to be my next question. Will the Kings be fun to watch?
While at first was very fond of the DeMar DeRozan experience, have since soured on it. I have also soured a bit on the Zach LaVine experience. Sabonis, I still love watching play. But putting him with those two guys is very difficult for him to do all the things that he's best at. So I will enjoy watching Sabonis, but beyond that, I'm not saying that I'm exactly champing at the bit to continue watching the Kings this year.
It'll be like a decent playoff drought year. I think some games will be fun and exciting, but there'll be a lot of disjointed, depressing, poor transition defense, like just a lot of moments where the Kings are just playing subpar, and that'll be very, very frustrating, and I may not even finish watching the game if we're down by so many. But, I think for the most part, like, I am excited to see them this season. Just every year, it's like, what are the jerseys looking like? Did we change them up a little? Who's got the new haircut? Hey, what's the rotation look like? Hey, what's Doug going to be wearing on the sideline? Hey, there's our GM, Scott Perry. Like, it's just fun every new season. There's always that beautiful, dew of hope on the blades of grass, so to speak. You know?
And it is the lens through which you experience the league. It's the way you see all of the other teams come into town. Oh, how'd they do against us? And that sort of informs your opinion on them when you watch sort of the nationally broadcast games and the playoffs. But I think the toughest thing about this year is that we've had such a taste of the good life. We had one little spoonful of it, and I think we're at that point where we were right before we traded DeMarcus Cousins, where it's like this rebuild has reached the end of its road.
We got to start another rebuild.
I
think that's what the organization's hesitant to do, because we've rebuilt so much. We finally got back to winning basketball, and we're still kind of close to it. We can still kind of see it, but I just don't think we're going to get it with this current group, which brings me to our next question. Do you think any of the major players will be traded? Talking about DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, Domantas Sabonis, Keegan Murray, Malik Monk, any kind of our starters or main players.
I think they're going to be trying like heck. I don't think Keegan Murray will be traded. I think he's part of whatever the next iteration of the Sacramento Kings are.
I would agree with that. I would also think Domantas Sabonis is in that as well. I really view him as, yes, a limited player, but I really view him as someone who's loyal to the city and seemingly wants to be a King for the foreseeable future. So I kind of would be surprised. I know he's a difficult player to build around. I think you could still build a very good team around him. He's very smart. He's a good facilitator. He's a good teammate. He just brings so many pluses to the table that I don't want to focus too much on, whatever his physical or defensive limitations are. But yeah, I don't know. Can you really see the Kings trading Sabonis?
If he asks for it, which he might.
Of course, if he asks for it, yes.
Yeah.
But if he doesn't, don't you feel like they're going to stick with him?
Totally. I mean, it's a tough player to just find a truly, top 50 at worst player. I think he's probably in the top 30. Some might even put him, in the 20s.
Yeah, I'd say top 20s.
Yeah. And, that's not nothing. We were a long time without such a player.
Right.
And when you are without them, you realize how important they are to just establishing a baseline level of competency, which he does. Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan, though, we are going to be turning over every rock.
Trying to trade him.
Yeah,
I think DeMar, I think had a tough year last year with the Kings. He experienced, the licks of the flames of basketball hell. And I don't know how committed Zach LaVine really is to any organization or to winning basketball. So we'll see how it goes. I do think there's a level of loyalty the organization has to Keegan Murray and to Domantas Sabonis. And I really think to Malik Monk. He's a fan favorite as well. But again, if he is proving to not be a perfect fit with the new direction of the team, they may look elsewhere.
I believe Malik mentioned in the offseason he bought some land in Sacramento.
Oh, good.
So that's
what do you mean
land?
Like a walnut farm or what?
Acres. He was referring to
All
acreage.
Right.
Yeah.
Acreage.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah,
Very cool. Grow some walnuts. You didn't refute the walnut bit, so maybe it's true.
Yeah.
Finally, where do you see the Kings as an organization at the end of the season? Where are we? Are we heading toward a rebuild? Are we sticking with kind of this middling team? Have we traded anyone? Are we pursuing anyone? Where do you sort of see us a year from now?
I see us sort of in the same spot that we are now.
God, that's depressing.
That's what's the hardest thing to watch about the year is that there just isn't even the hope of I think things are going to get better. I don't think things are going to get dramatically worse enough for us to be hilariously bad or bad in a way that earns us a high lottery pick. There's just kind of too many knowledgeable veterans on the team for us to sink that low. But I don't really see much positivity, frankly.
No, I agree with you. I'd be shocked if we made a blockbuster trade just given the talent we have to put out, and I don't know really what great player we could bring in. It's possible we blow it up and go super young and go into draft picks, but I don't know. I do feel like the team is still committed to trying to win. I don't get the sense that, Doug Christie, he would be a good rebuild coach. I wouldn't be surprised if they just stuck with him for a number of years and were just like, hey, shepherd us through the downfall, shepherd us through the rebuild, build kind of our culture around Doug and his tough-mindedness. I don't know much about Scott Perry as a GM, but yeah, I do wonder if kind of Doug is the guy we might just stick with and see if the team can follow him. But we'll see.
So.
We'll see.
I don't see Doug getting fired.
No, me neither. But we said that about a lot of coaches who don't have jobs anymore. All right, I want to kick this next bit over to you. This was something we were chatting about quite a bit in the lead up to this podcast. This is something we're calling the art of terrible basketball. And just to preface this, you and I have watched so much terrible Kings basketball. I mean, a couple decades of it cumulatively, and we just know all the telltale signs of terrible basketball. Great basketball is obvious. There's ball movement, there's sacrifice, there's hustle, there's all these things that any Joe Schmo watching a basketball game could tell you is great basketball. But you and I, we are well versed in the art of terrible basketball. So let's go kind of piece by piece here. You jotted some stuff down just in regards to the art of terrible basketball and how we've seen it through the Sacramento Kings.
Number one is an utter lack of focus on both defense and offense.
Yeah.
You need to be aware on offense to make savvy cuts, to make the right pass, to do all the things that really unlock a team's potential. But focus really kills you.
Yeah.
if you're lacking it on defense. You just get cut to pieces. You're slamming into screens that you didn't realize would be there. You're mixing up who's supposed to be guarding who.
Pointing fingers,
Yes.
leaving guys wide open from three, shrugging at the coach. It's awful.
Which
Awful to watch.
Not only demoralizes your team, but gives the other team easy points, which energizes them, and you just get this vicious cycle of terribleness.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If ball movement, though, is a hallmark of good basketball, what then is the flip side and hallmark of bad basketball?
Obviously, dribbling too much and trying to do everything yourself. Any second grade coach will tell you the ball moves faster than a player can
Right.
dribble it. And that is something that professional basketball players somehow seem to forget occasionally when they're playing for the Sacramento Kings.
Buddy Hield certainly forgot it a lot on the Kings. He was a great catch and shoot player. There was some statistic where he shot almost 70-80% on catch and shoot threes, but then when he dribbled it, he would shoot 10% from three.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show it's like you play in the rhythm, you're definitely going to do a lot better than dribble. Right?
Yeah. No, there's just, these guys are so excellent at basketball and they have such self-belief that you can see why they think they can do it themselves, but you probably can't on a consistent basis. And if you think you can, you're probably playing for a bad basketball team.
There's a lot of, you've mentioned this before when we've watched games, is teams abandon the game plan. They favor one-on-one instead of well-executed offense. Where does that come from? Do you think it's just the fear of the player that, things aren't going well, I got to be the hero?
Yes.
And when in reality, it's like, hey, just run the pick and roll again. Just run the play again. Let the defense make a mistake. Don't you cause these issues to your own team, right?
Yeah, it's sort of a selfishness. It's I'll just get a bucket and then we can turn things around. Whereas
Right.
the way you turn things around is by committing to playing good, solid, team-oriented basketball.
How about not rebounding? That drive you nuts?
That drives me nuts. Yeah, you lose rebounds. You lose any sort of hustle play. You're not getting to the ball. You're not taking advantage of opportunities when they present themselves. You're shooting yourself in the foot. I mean, the great teams find themselves about 10 extra points just by making heads-up plays, getting extra rebounds or putbacks, getting that steal in the backcourt. All of these little things that, add up over the course of a game.
From the coaching side of it, we're talking a lot about on the court stuff. From the coaching side of it, the problems seem to be in the Kings organization through the drought years that you had these coaches that would impose too strict of an offense that the players just would not buy into, or they would have too lackadaisical of an offense and give the players too much freedom. Whereas the answer is really in the middle. You want to have these schemes, you want to have these strategies, but you do want to allow some player freedom. Isn't that right?
Yeah, you want kind of the players to take the ownership of the offense. I would say that Steph Curry and Steve Kerr both feel a sort of joint ownership over the offense. It doesn't feel like Steph Curry's running Steve Kerr's offense or Steve Kerr is imposing something upon Steph Curry that he doesn't want. You want to fit your system to your players, and that is difficult when your players don't fit very well together, and so there is no system that can accommodate all of their disparate skill sets.
And lastly, we've done on the court, we've done coaching. When it comes to sort of organizational level, like general manager ownerships, what is their contribution to the art of terrible basketball?
Lack of clarity, lack of decisiveness, cheapness.
From the ownership,
Yes.
cheapness.
And also cowardice, not owning up to decisions,
Yeah.
not being outright trying to lie to the media, which is something that just doesn't really work. It kind of happened with the firing of Mike Brown. Monty McNair sort of had to eat that, when it was pretty clearly a Vivek Ranadive decision, and those sort of things just rub the fan base the wrong way, and also just make you look bad in the eyes of the media, and also show you to be kind of surrounded by sycophants.
Yeah.
Like if you think that you can get away with lying to the media, it's clear that you don't have anybody in your inner circle being like, look, we have to be honest or everyone's going to obviously see through this for the nonsense that it is. And
fans, I think, feel, to your point, they don't like, media doesn't like to be lied to. Fans don't like to be lied to. They feel a sense of ownership over the team. You know, the owners wouldn't have doodly squat if the fans didn't pack their arena every night and buy the merchandise, right? So the fans have some skin in the game. And so when they're lied to, I think it's very frustrating. The other thing I would add on the general manager side, which we did a lot during the lean years, was a misevaluation of talent. We would think, oh, we got a really good team this year, super team, but young, or this guy really is a starting power forward in Jason Thompson for 7 years. And it was just delusional. It was just like, these are third stringers. These are guys who don't belong in the league, and we're playing them 32 minutes a night. It was just absolutely crazy.
Right, which is tough. And to your point about, you know, owners own the team, but fans have ownership of it. This whole podcast, we've been calling the Kings us. We've been saying us.
Right.
This is how we did in the
Yes,
playoffs.
right.
And I think that's also another thing that's funny about being a fan of a perennially terrible team is that you personally identify with this brand of mediocrity. And it does say something about you that, you know, there's almost this like, God, am I bad? Am I not good because my team is good? Your identity and mood can get so tied up in a team that it really can have an impact on you and your personality.
Yeah, and your relationships and your attitudes toward others, you start taking it out on people. You know
how other people see you, like they see you're a Kings fan.
You're a loser.
Yeah,
you're a dud.
Yeah, but I think at the same time, it shows a level of perseverance and a willingness to stick things out, which I think are the positive things I will take from the playoff drought.
I agree. Well, let's look back one last time and just answer a few final questions. You know, we already done a big 2-part podcast about our love for the Kings. We're not fanatics of most things, but the Sacramento Kings are one thing we really care about. But let's try to have a little levity here as we look back at our 16-year playoff drought. I want to ask you, what would you say is the rock bottom or low point of the 16-year playoff drought?
The puke game.
The puke game.
Walton.
Yeah.
That's about as bad as it got. That team was just absolutely going nowhere. A fan embarrasses himself right on the floor.
Makes a mess all over himself.
The game is delayed.
Players are snickering in their sleeves. Yeah.
It's just not something that happens at a high-class organization. That guy is never on the sitting court side.
He's never probably allowed in the arena ever again. Made a mess all over himself.
That one I think is pretty bad, pretty low down.
I think, you could say welcome to basketball hell.
Yes.
When a player is telling the incoming coach, welcome to basketball hell, I mean, I know it's the namesake of the podcast, so it's maybe cheating to give it the nod, but I do think there is something to be said about, boy, how dysfunctional is a team when a star player is jokingly referring to the team as basketball hell, and it's just like, hey, another coach through the carousel. Like, it just is, that just shows a deep dysfunction throughout the team.
Yeah, and as a final mention, I'd maybe say the trading of DeMarcus Cousins was one that I felt pretty strongly at the moment. In retrospect, kind of probably the right decision, considering DeMarcus got injured shortly afterwards and was never really the same. Yeah. But, a guy who was the heart and soul of the team. And
a Musselman's DUI up there and all. Yeah, I mean, I know that was early on. But I do think, my gut instinct was the puke game. And I really think, looking back with all this research, I think it is the puke game. Let me ask you this. What specific moment, would you say perfectly captures or sums up the Kings playoff drought? Is it the puke game? Is it another thing? What do you think? You want a sec to think about it? Because I think I have one. There was a game when I was in college. This would have been 2015 or late 2014, my freshman year. And I was watching a game with my roommate, another guy from Sacramento, and we were watching the Kings game before going out for a party. Can you believe there were no women watching the game with us? But it was just us. We were watching the game. We were playing Memphis, and I remember we were up against Memphis with about .2 on the clock. And Memphis, basically, their only chance of winning was to execute an alley-oop or tip-in play, and that was the only chance they could win. There was 0.2 seconds on the clock. We had a center, Ryan Hollins, who was defending the inbound. The player was inbounding from about midcourt, and the player on the Grizzlies threw the ball way above Ryan Hollins' head toward the hoop. I think it was Courtney Lee or someone on the Grizzlies caught the ball and did a reverse layup, and the ball went in an alley-oop before the horn went off. But then there was this long delay because it was believed on the inbound, Ryan Hollins had tipped the ball, and if a player tips the ball, the clock's supposed to start, so the alley-oop wouldn't count. So they spent about 20 minutes analyzing, like it was the Zapruder footage, Ryan Hollins tipping the ball. Did the ball change the trajectory? And I swear, to this day, it did look like Ryan Hollins touched the ball, and it would have started the clock, and the shot would not have counted, and the Kings would have won. But the refs did not go through with this, and the refs gave the Grizzlies the win, said Ryan Hollins did not touch it. And as soon as the announcement was made, you could hear Grant Napier saying, and that's it, the Grizzlies have won it. And my roommate at the time immediately turned the TV off and slammed the door and walked out, and I just was sitting there wallowing in King shame. And that, to me, as I was thinking about it, it really sums it up, because it's a heartbreaking defeat. It involves this glimmer of hope, this little cheapskate, maybe we got a little finger on it and the clock should have started and maybe it shouldn't count, but then we just end up losing anyway despite this little glimmer of hope. And that, to me, as I was looking back on it, I was like, that really sums it up. I'm watching a game in the middle of January, a meaningless game for a meaningless team, holding on to the hope that we, through a loophole, stole the win on the road. And that, to me, in terms of my fandom, in terms of the drought, in terms of sticking with the team through thick and thin, that's the moment that captures it.
Yeah, that's a good one. The one that comes to my mind is there was a late career Kobe Bryant moment where his teams were terrible and they were sort of at the level of awfulness of the Sacramento Kings. And this was also around the time when the Kings were thinking of leaving, and it was sort of up in the air as to whether or not they would still be sticking around Sacramento. If you turned on the Kings the next season, would they still be playing in Sacramento? And the Kings were up on the Lakers, and Kobe, as he had done so many times before, brought the Lakers back and then sunk a back-breaking three-pointer to win the game.
Was this in front of our bench?
In front of our bench, yeah. And then this is either this game or a couple of games later, Grant and Jerry have what they think might be their final sign-off. It's a losing season. At the end of a losing season, the last game of a losing season, and it's in the middle of losing seasons. There's losing ahead. There's losing behind. And yet the fans are still crammed into the arena, still there, and Grant gets choked up as he's signing off, and Jerry is just literally fully crying right next to him, and they barely make it off the air. And I think that is the other side of the Sacramento Kings, is that this has been such a lackluster franchise that has so rarely rewarded the loyalty of a diehard community of fans, and yet it's there's nothing they can do. The Kings, there will never be a level of badness so bad that they will alienate the fans away, and that'll still always sort of occupy this very special place in Sacramento. So I think on the sort of maybe positive side, that's what I think of when I think of the drought.
Well, let's close with this. What have you learned from the drought? You touched on it a little bit, but if you had to boil it down to kind of one word or sort of one lesson, what have you learned from the 16-year playoff drought? Losing behind us, some losing ahead. What have you learned from being a Sacramento Kings fan?
When times are good, really appreciate them because you don't know how fleeting they might be.
Yeah, I agree with you. Water is better when you're thirsty. Food is better when you're hungry.
And the corollary to that is when times are bad and some tiny little good thing happens to you, appreciate it.
Last thing I'd add to, it was what DeMarcus Cousins preached so many times over the years, loyalty. You got to, through thick and thin, feast or famine, stick by those things, those people you love. That it is good in life to have tradition. It is good in life to hold on to things and put value in things, even if they don't always bring you joy, just for the hope that they will bring you joy.
Oh, beautiful, buddy. Well
Thank
said.
you, buddy. Thank you, buddy. All right, you done talking about the Kings?
Yeah.
All right, let's go watch a game, shall we?
Yeah.
All right, please subscribe, comment, and leave a rating. Send questions, comments, or big idea suggestions to our business email, flynnbrospod@gmail.com. Thank you to our producer, Philadelphia sports fan Will Slade, and we'll see you next time on the Flynn Brothers podcast. Take care, buddy.
No, buddy, you take care.